Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Binyamin Tjong-Alvares with the latest economic reports. Coming up, as Qatar invests heavily in Europe, some Europeans are fearful. And ransomware gradually takes over smartphones. First, the headlines. Ukraine raised its key lending rate by 10.5 percentage points to 30% in a desperate move to temper spiraling inflation and halt its sinking currency. Ukraine's national bank said the move was aimed at helping push the hryvnia back to the rate used to calculate the government's annual budget, around 21.5 to the dollar. The hryvnia dropped more than 40% since the start of this year, on top of a 40% drop in 2014. The currency strengthened slightly to 24.5 to the dollar after hitting a record low of 33.75 last week. And as the standoff with Russia continues, U.S. and European leaders agreed to impose additional costs on Russia if peace agreements in the Ukraine conflict are not implemented. India's central bank on Wednesday surprised markets with a cut to its key lending rate for the second time this year. India cut its main repurchase rate by a quarter percentage point to 7.5%, citing weakness in some sectors and favorable inflation. India's consumer price inflation slowed to 5.1% in January as falling oil and commodity prices globally helped curb inflation. Indian stocks traded slightly higher on Wednesday morning, with the S&P BSE Sensex index up about 1%. El Salvador will export sugar to China for the first time ever, a sign of China's increasing reach into Central America. Officials of the Central American nation said they will export 52,000 tons of raw sugar worth $20 million to China during the 2014-2015 season. The shipment, which comprises about 10% of the country's total sugar production, is the single largest sugar parcel in the history of El Salvador. The massive export of sugar comes after Beijing lowered its tariffs and increased the import quota for sugar. Previously, sugar from El Salvador attracted a 125% tariff to enter the Chinese market, when other countries were being charged 50%.
We were able to finalize, in accordance with our policy that benefits the private sector, with the export of more than 50,000 metric tons of crude sugar to be sent on this ship, one of the biggest to have docked in our country.
The three West African states hardest hit by Ebola asked for help from donors on Tuesday, now that the epidemic seems to be waning. Leaders of Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone said they needed help to repair the damage to their economies and to stamp out new infections. Ebola has killed around 10,000 people in the three countries and delivered a severe setback to their economies. The World Bank estimates the epidemic will cost them at least $1.6 billion in lost economic growth this year. International donors have pledged nearly $5 billion to help combat the Ebola outbreak, but only about half of that has been disbursed so far.
It is also very important to take into account the consequences of Ebola on our economies, on the social fabric of our society, on economic life, etc. So we support companies, and above all, we also support major companies in big countries who come to us.
Qatar, the world's richest country per capita, where nearly 90% of the population are expatriates, has been investing heavily in Europe. The peninsula's sovereign wealth fund has an estimated $115 billion in assets, with 80% allocated in Europe. And as Qataris are increasingly invested around the continent, some Europeans fear how it might affect their tradition.
Qatar's sovereign fund has bought out other shareholders to take full control of a prime business area in Milan, Italy. The Porta Nuova district is one of the premier areas in Italy, and the announcement has irked some Italians who had hoped to keep ownership in Italian hands.
I was already perplexed by the fact Italian investors didn't seem interested in buying this neighborhood. But now the fact it belongs 100% to foreigners, I am awestruck.
The head of the property group that owned the area would not say how much the Qatar Investment Authority paid to take the 100% stake, but the 25-building development is valued at least $2.2 billion, according to the AFP report. Some media reports say investors took off with 30% profit in hand. One of the concerns people have is whether investors from afar will be interested in upkeep if Milan seems less attractive down the road.
It's quite regrettable that a historical zone of Milan is in foreign hands. We hope that it keeps the neighborhood in a good state for a long time and that it won't be abandoned once economic interest is over.
The district of the purchase is the site of a number of landmarks, and the Italian bank Unicredit had its headquarters there. Qatar has recently purchased a number of buildings, institutions, and stocks in Europe, including Harrods department store in London and Saint-Germain football club in Paris.
And we stay in the Persian Gulf region, which is generally known for its oil-based wealth and large expat communities. While the drop in the price of crude oil has weighed on oil producers worldwide, money continues to roll in the oil-rich nations of the Persian Gulf. We're joined now by ITV News journalist Ayman Siksak for a look at some recent stories from the Persian Gulf in Financial Bazaar. Mr. Siksak, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Binyamin.
Okay, so what are we talking about here?
Well, we're talking about several things concerning with the Gulf states, and we're beginning with something from outside the Gulf states, actually. We're beginning with Ghana, where the financial situation is absolutely dire. The exterior minister just said that 2,000 more women from Ghana left the country for the Gulf states specifically.
Which are a big magnet, of course, for a lot of expatriates. A lot of people go to work there.
Absolutely. People are looking for more opportunities. The sad thing is that these women who come from Ghana, where there's shortage of electricity and water, and actually several presidents in a recent financial summit called Ghana a deficit state, these women go looking for a better future. However, they end up usually in the service industry or as cleaners in the homes of the rich. One of the things we know about the Gulf states is that the gap between the very rich and the very poor is an extremely big and significant gap, and it's not going towards reduction anytime soon.
Would it be true to say that, I mean, the expatriate community, so to speak, that goes there, is the majority of them in the service industry?
I think that's a fair assessment, and I think the Gulf states needs them in order to, like a capitalist organization, in order to maintain this structure of wealth.
Right, of course. What else do we have going on in the Gulf states?
Well, the Gulf states also want to increase cooperation with Pakistan, economic cooperation with Pakistan. There are a huge number, a growing number of Pakistani businessmen, wealthy men, specifically in the United Arab Emirates.
Right.
And Javed Malik, the prime minister, said that they need to increase cooperations between the UAE and Pakistan in order to take advantage of this new population that's growing in the United Arab Emirates right now.
What kind of business would there be between Pakistan and the United Arab Emirates? The United Arab Emirates is less so entrenched in oil, isn't it? I mean, they're less beholden to it.
I think so, and that's why they're interested in business with Pakistan, because the United Arab Emirates is constantly looking to expand its venture businesses, but there's also a potential for high-tech investments there. Pakistan needs that for sure. And you know, big money and other big money tend to find ways to cooperate when they really want to.
Very well said. Okay, and what else are we going at here?
Well, speaking of big money, the U.S. had initially, we're going back slightly in history here to 2006, the U.S. had initially agreed with several Gulf states to give them about $375 million a year for offshore oil rigging. But the U.S. is now going back on this decision. It was supposed to start last year, and the Gulf states are up in arms about that. Even though the water that they're working in is federal water and it belongs to the United States, they supply most of the workforce, and they suffer most of the environmental damages that these operations always entail. So a fight there for money in oil, as if oil needed more bad news.
I'm not entirely surprised, of course, considering the situation with oil, with shale, with OPEC. It's not surprising entirely that there would be this mild standoff, so to speak, if you want. Last story,
a little bit of good news from the Gulf states, not making money, but donating money to Egypt. About $32 billion were donated from several Gulf states to Egypt so far. And this is, of course, after the uprising, where they wanted to help Egypt reignite its economy and stand back on its feet. Lots of money.
Okay, well, Ivan Siksak, thanks for joining us in Financial Bazaar.
Thank you, Binyamin.
Thank you. Now, computer and smartphone viruses cause billions of dollars worth of economic damage each year, and are constantly evolving to trick their prospective hosts. Ransomware, a particularly aggressive form of malware, affects both desktop computers and increasingly smartphones, where it poses as an app before locking the user out of the device unless a ransom is paid.
When marriage and family therapist Valerie Goss booted up her computer one day last May, a shock lay in store.
There was this dark screen with this text, and it said that my files had been encrypted, and I just assumed, oh, I must have done something wrong.
Her PC had been infected by ransomware, malware that holds a device hostage until a sum of money is paid. Fortunately, Goss didn't have clients' information stored on her computer, but she did risk losing all her personal files if she didn't pay $500 in the virtual currency Bitcoin within 24 hours.
I felt like I'd been robbed. I was scared, and I felt pressed for time.
Acting on her son's advice, Goss decided not to pay the ransom, and cybersecurity experts say she made the right decision.
A quarter to half the time, users don't get their data back. So unfortunately, that is the right thing to do, is to just relinquish that data, have a backup hopefully somewhere of older data or current data, and that will save you.
Ransomware is not a new phenomenon, but it's becoming more prevalent, especially on mobile devices powered by Android. That's according to San Francisco security firm Lookout. Tracking anonymous data from more than 60 million users, Lookout found ransomware contributed significantly to a 75% jump in US mobile malware between 2013 and 2014. Analysts have seen 5 major ransomware families in the last year, including Scare Me Not and Scare Package. They often come disguised as an app in what's called a drive-by download.
A customer will navigate to a malicious website that they don't realize is malicious, and it will secretly drop an application into the phone.
If the user unwittingly gives the app special privileges, it locks the phone and they receive this warning, pretending to be from the FBI. Kelly advises taking preventative measures.
Put a mobile security app on your phone. This is going to be monitoring, watching out for you for any kind of malware that hides in the background to malware that's very loud like ransomware is.
In the unlikely event the cybercriminals behind ransomware are tracked down, it's too late for Valerie Goss's old hard drive. These days she's careful to make copies of all her files.
And now for a roundup of some offbeat stories that are no less newsworthy in Media Watch. Daniel Roth.
How's it going?
Good. So, what kind of stories do you have for us today?
Well, I've been on this robot kick for the last few weeks. I don't know if you've noticed. Every other day I come in with another story about robots taking over this industry, taking over that job. So now Larry Summers, who is among the more famous economists. If you know economists, you probably know Larry Summers. Or if you saw The Social Network, he was the president of Harvard when Facebook was being established. Right. He, having nothing to do with the establishment, of course, he actually came out surprisingly and said a couple of weeks ago something that most economists disagree with. Most economists say robots are taking over jobs. We need to educate people to take on higher level jobs that robots won't take on. Of course, all of the news is awash with stories of lawyers being replaced by robots, news anchors being replaced by robots,
news anchors,
hotel desk clerks, everything. And so what Larry Summers said, which is totally out of character for him, former Treasury Secretary, said it's not about education. It's about better union structures. It's about better worker protections. Yeah, it's about regulation. Education can help, but it will not fix the problem. If you take, for example, in the university, it used to be that for every professor there was 2 assistants or something like this. Nowadays they have spell checking, they have voicemail, they have email, they have everything nowadays. These are things they've had for many years, but in the mid-20th century they didn't have these things.
This is obviously a great advancement, isn't it? I mean, you're talking about like a situation where, you know, it almost like sounds like a Soviet-type situation where you have like this kind of clerk and that kind of clerk and whatever. I mean, it's so much less efficient, isn't it?
Well, so he's not defending the idea of keeping jobs unnecessarily.
Right.
What he's saying is that in the areas where we work and in the areas where we're building new industries where humans will work, we definitely just need regulations that protect those people, because what's happening is it's not just a question of how much you know, what degree you have that's going to get you a paycheck. It's the fact that literally companies can hire robots for cheaper, so they do, and there's not any alternative paths.
I would say that in addition to that, it's also the fact that they are increasingly more, you know, they're better. The robots are increasingly better, basically.
Indeed, indeed.
All right, well, on that note, we're going to have to go. Mr. Robato, thanks for joining us on the show. That is the Economy Show for today. I'm Binyamin Tjong-Alvares. Thanks for watching. Join us again tomorrow.